Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hey listeners, it's Lindsay Smith-Rogers. As an answer to skyrocketing prescription drug prices, the Trump administration recently launched TrumpRx, a web platform that can link consumers to discounts on a small but growing number of medications. Today, Dr. Mariana Socal, a Johns Hopkins expert on drug pricing, talks to Stephanie Desmon about how it works, who it may help, and whether TrumpRx could lead to unintended consequences. Let's listen.
Mariana Socal, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So, as we all know, the cost of prescription drugs is really high and has been for a while. I read something that says that 1 in 4 people under 65 have difficulty affording their medications. It's even worse for uninsured people. The Trump administration has created something called TrumpRx to help make a dent in drug prices. I'm wondering what you can tell me about it. Let's start with, what is it?
Well, TrumpRx is a new platform that the administration developed where drug manufacturers can offer lower prices to American consumers in a concentrated way. So all the different drug manufacturers can offer their drugs in the same platform. But it's called a direct-to-consumer sales. But in fact, consumers still will need to get these drugs at a pharmacy. So it's a platform where all these different offers are basically congregated.
So I can go to the site and I can look up a variety of medications to see if I can get them cheaper on this than, say, through my insurance, or if I don't have insurance, if it's a cheaper price.
Correct.
So my understanding is there's 43 medications currently on the site.
It is about 43, 44 drugs that are offered in this platform today. It's a platform that recently launched. But the common characteristic across these drugs is that these drug manufacturers, they have agreed, they are all branded products, which means they are produced, each one of them, by this branded company. They have a trademark name, and the company has the rights to produce these drugs. And these companies have offered what is called, quote, most favored nation prices, quote, in exchange for participating in the platform. So what does that mean? It means that those drugs that are advertised in these platforms, they are produced by companies who basically made a deal with the administration, having their drug advertised in exchange for offering this lower price. That in this case is called most favored nation to convey the idea that it is lower than what other countries may be paying for these drugs. It doesn't mean that it's the lowest price available in the U.S. for these drugs.
I was going to ask about that. So just because it's showing a lower price, that doesn't mean it's showing the lowest price.
That is correct, especially because of two things we should discuss. Number one is that even though these drugs are produced by, these branded manufacturers, so they have a brand name, often these drugs may have generics available. And so the person could be better off by going to the pharmacy and getting a generic for a cheaper price. I'll give you an example. Protonix is a very, very old drug. It's a drug to protect your stomach for people who have, gastric problems, gastroesophageal reflux, for example, or gastritis, etc. The generic name is pantoprazole. So Protonix in TrumpRx, it's being offered by Pfizer, who is the manufacturer, right? And it costs $200 in TrumpRx. Yes, it is a discount. It represents a discount of the list price of what Pfizer says they're going to charge for their drug, right? But if you go to a regular pharmacy and you want to get a generic, you can get the generic in Amazon for $11. This is orders of magnitude cheaper, and it's the exact same drug, is FDA approved, and so on. So that is one situation where, you already mentioned, number one, the fact that it's a limited list of drugs, so it doesn't offer lower prices for everything that we may need. The second thing is, there may be lower priced options available in the market, and significantly lower. I mean, let's just think about it. You have a $200 drug that you can get, in Amazon for $11, or in Walmart for $10 and so on. It's like orders of magnitude, more expensive than something else that is also available in the US.
Who is this designed to help?
Well, the third thing I should have said, and it's important for us to remember, is that in the United States, the experience of a person as a consumer, it is primarily determined by that consumer's insurance coverage. First of all, do they have coverage or not? And if they do, what kind of coverage is available? So, for example, as you're asking me, what kind of individuals is this platform trying to help? On the one hand, certainly if the person does not have insurance, they will be looking and shopping around for the deepest discounts that they can find, right? But as we just mentioned, not always this branded drug with a discount will be the cheapest price. So that's one thing. Other drugs that are available in TrumpRx are drugs that are often not covered by insurance. You're thinking about weight loss drugs. You're thinking about drugs for infertility to help with fertility procedures. These are hormones and fertility stimulators. And unfortunately, certain plans in America don't cover obesity drugs, weight loss drugs, and infertility drugs. So if a person does have insurance, but insurance is not covering these drugs, they will be situations where they may benefit in these cases. And finally, there's also some cases where insurance will charge such a high cost share on a certain drug that finding these discounts in TrumpRx or other services, there's similar platforms available like GoodRx and so on. Finding these discounts online could also be an option.
I know that I have insurance and I've gone to the pharmacy when I didn't like how much they wanted to charge me, and I've asked them to look up the GoodRx price and they just give it to me. That feels seamless. How is TrumpRx different?
I don't think it's much different. It also works as a coupon. And to be honest, all these manufacturers, they also offer coupons directly to consumer. So if you go to the manufacturers' websites, they also offer coupons, patient assistance programs, and so on. So these manufacturers, they are already trying to offer alternative pathways for patients to get these drugs, understanding that they are drugs that are either not often covered or they're drugs that do have other options. So they are trying to have visibility for their products and help people who, for some reason, want that branded option.
I'm hearing that this will likely have a minimal impact on the price of drugs.
Well, it's not changing the price itself, so it's an excellent question. It's not changing the price, it's giving an opportunity to obtain a discount for very specific individuals, right? If a person does have insurance and they have the drug covered under the insurance, it's most likely that their cost sharing will be lower than what's offered in this platform. And if it's not, one thing that we should remember is that anytime you're paying for drugs through your insurance, you're contributing to your deductible. And most individuals with chronic conditions, most of these drugs in TrumpRx are for chronic conditions. And so many people in chronic conditions, they will need other drugs. So it is a problem here that patients may be right now asked to pay twice or three times. They're paying for their insurance premium, they're paying for their deductible for their regular drugs, and then they're paying out of pocket for this additional drug that they get through TrumpRx, So I think it's important for individuals who do have insurance that they also have to weigh paying out of pocket for these drugs and not contributing to their deductible, that they will have to, no matter what, they will have to pay as well.
Sounds complicated.
I agree with that. We call it savings just because prices in the United States, they are so egregiously non-transparent, right? And drug manufacturers, they are known for setting very, very high list prices and announcing that those drugs will cost so much more. And in fact, behind closed doors, they are happy to negotiate price reductions with insurance companies, right? Historically, what has not happened is that these price reductions become available to patients. Whenever a patient needs to pay cash, typically they will be facing these very, very high, sticker prices. And it's for these situations, under this framing, yes, it may look like savings, but let's not be fooled, because these prices, even though they're lower than what drug manufacturers state they are charging for their drugs, they are definitely higher than what health insurers really have to pay for these drugs. So they're providing a path to give some reductions to some people who are paying cash that really are not benefiting from the system of non-transparent prices that we have today. But it is by far, I'm sure, not comparable to what insurers are really paying for these drugs.
So you're saying that price cuts don't necessarily equal affordability.
Absolutely. In this metric that you mentioned, and unfortunately is a very consistent metric year after year, about 1/4 of Americans mentioned that they could not afford a drug that they needed because of the cost. That statistic is very robust, and it's very concerning, because we know that it's about 1 in 10 Americans that doesn't have insurance, and hopefully a little bit less than that even. So it means that even for some individuals with insurance, their price sharing requirements, their cost sharing requirements sometimes are higher, because maybe they're in the deductible phase and they need to pay full cost of the drug, right? In this system that we have today, where prices are not transparent, it really penalizes the cash-paying consumer, the person who is in their deductible phase, and so on. So for these situations, I think it is welcome to know that manufacturers can give price reductions and still make a profit on these drugs. Manufacturers are not making a loss on the drugs that they are offering in TrumpRx. They are still making a profit. So it raises the question about, why does the price really need to be, $500 if the manufacturer is willing to be paid, $20 for the drug or something like that?
What are some other impacts of a platform like TrumpRx?
Well, I think one of the unintended consequences is if a person is paying cash for their drugs through TrumpRx, and they're also paying for insurance, and they're also paying their deductible for the other drugs they're taking, one of the unintended consequences is that their overall spending may be higher than if they were using insurance for everything. But the other unintended consequence, which I think we should be very aware and concerned about, is that some of these drugs, like I mentioned, weight loss, fertility, and so on, some of these drugs are already not always covered by insurance. And my concern here of one possible unintended consequence is that insurance companies can now say, look, this drug is available through TrumpRx. I have now even less incentive to cover it for my beneficiaries. So it's possible that one unintended consequence is that insurance coverage may go down for these drugs moving forward.
Do you think people can benefit from using TrumpRx?
I do. I think in the very specific situations, according to each person's case, the specific drug that they need, other drugs that they may expect to take during the year, the type of insurance coverage that they currently have, if they do have, the types of drugs that are covered. But that will benefit a very specific set of individuals, and honestly, we're talking about, less than 50 drugs that are very specific, used in very specific clinical cases, and then possibly benefiting a very specific number of patients. So the question here in my mind is, can patients have enough information to do very good informed decisions about what is the best course of action, what is the choice that will give them lower costs over the course of the entire year, especially thinking about other drugs that they may need down the line, and how all these costs will come together, thinking about premiums, deductibles, and coverage overall, and how this will play out. I think generally speaking, knowing how non-transparent prices are and how difficult it is to get information, I think generally patients are going to be very challenged, very limited in the way that they can weigh all of these different factors and make the decision that's the best for them.
This lack of transparency is not solved by TrumpRx, is that correct?
Absolutely not.
So what could the long-term impact be of TrumpRx on the drug market?
Well, I think for these specific drugs that are not frequently insurance covered, so for example, let's say weight loss drugs, right? Some people would otherwise not have these lower prices. So for these drugs, they may be capturing more patients than they would otherwise without TrumpRx. But that's very specific, and it's for drugs that otherwise could possibly become more frequently covered by insurance if this alternative was not available. So on the long term, it could be expanding access to some individuals, to some drugs, but it also could have the unintended consequence that other people who today have coverage may lose it because insurers may not have an incentive to cover these drugs anymore.
Mariana Socal, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmon, and Rachel Walsh. Audio production by Michael Bonfils, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from J.B. Arbogast, Spencer Greer, and Chip Hickey. Distribution and social media by Rachel Walsh, with support from Nick Moran and Brianna Iacovelli. Follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Public Health Pod for more public health takes and special content. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.